People keep waiting for the housing market to crash. They say it casually. They say it confidently. Sometimes they even say it hopefully. I'll buy when the market crashes. The idea has been floating around for years now. And yet, here we are, no real crash. Corrections in some places, it's very, very localized. Slowdowns in others, but no real broad collapse. The reason this matters is not because crashes never happen, they do. But the thing we have to understand is the reason it matters is because most people fundamentally just misunderstand why housing crashes even happen. And because of that misunderstanding, they keep waiting for conditions that are unlikely to show up really the way they imagine. Most people think crashes happen when prices get too high. That's not what causes crashes. High prices alone don't break housing, as we have found over the last couple of years. What breaks housing is forced selling at scale. Crashes happen when a large number of people are forced to sell at the same time. Not because they want to, because they have to. I think that's the key distinction most people are missing. In 2008, if we all recall, people didn't sell because they felt uncomfortable or wanted to move up. They sold because they couldn't make the payment, or because the loan structure collapsed, or because the job disappeared and there was no cushion. The housing crash was not about price. It was about fragility. Loans were extremely fragile back then. Borrowers were way over leveraged. Underwriting was too loose. Risk was completely hidden. When the pressure showed up, everything broke all at one time. That is what a crash looks like. Now, let's compare that to today. Most homeowners today are sitting on fixed rate mortgages, locked in payments, historically low rates, significant equity. Those three things matter more than price charts. A homeowner with a 3% fixed rate and an equity is not a forced seller. Even if prices flatten, even if rates rise, even if headlines get super scary, they can just stay put. And when people can stay put, supply stays constrained. Constrained supply prevents crashes. This is why so many crash predictions fail. They focus on affordability and price, but ignore loan structure. Loan structure determines behavior. Behavior determines markets. Another thing people misunderstand is foreclosure. They assume rising rates lead to foreclosure. That's not true. They don't. Foreclosures happen when people can't make payments. And here's the reality. Most homeowners today have payments that are lower than the current market rents. That creates an incentive to stay. Even if someone loses their job, selling is often an option before foreclosure. That's the one thing that's very different from 2008. When many homeowners owed more than their home was worth, they couldn't sell. They were trapped. Trapped homeowners became forced sellers. That is when pricing collapsed. I mean, the vast majority of homeowners today are not trapped. They have options. Options stabilize markets or keep them stable. Another factor people ignore is the underwriting quality, and holy mackerel, was it so bad. Post-2008 lending standards have changed so much. Income is now verified. Assets are documented. Ability to repay is real. That doesn't mean defaults don't happen. It just means defaults don't cascade systemically the way they did before. Crashes require contagion. Contagion requires weak foundations. The foundation today is just so much stronger than people want to admit. And here's another misunderstanding, confusing with a slowdown. A slowdown is when transactions decrease. A crash is when prices collapse rapidly due to forced selling. High rates, slow transactions, they don't automatically cause crashes. When rates rise, people pause. They don't panic sell. Pause is not collapse. In fact, high rates often reduce supply. Homeowners with low rates, they don't want to move. I don't want to move. They stay. That reduces inventory. Reduced inventory supports prices. Now, this is counterintuitive to a lot of people. They assume high rates must lead to lower prices. Sometimes they do, locally, but system-wide crashes require pressure that forces people out. Right now, that pressure, it's just not there. Another thing people waiting for a crash underestimate is really our government's response. Housing is deeply tied to the broader economy. Policymakers learned the hard way in 2008. They intervened much earlier now. Forbearance, loan modifications, liquidity programs, those tools didn't exist at scale before. That doesn't mean markets can't correct. It means collapses are harder to engineer unintentionally. Another factor is demographics. There is still strong demand for housing and getting stronger each year. Millennials are forming families. There is a household formation. Immigration is still a thing. Demand doesn't disappear just because rates rise. It shifts. And when demand exists and supply is constrained, prices don't free fall. They simply stabilize or move slowly. That frustrates the people waiting for these dramatic drops and trying to time it. But frustration does not change fundamentals. Another mistake people are making is assuming that a crash means an opportunity. Here's the thing, crashes hurt most of the people who experience them. They come with, typically, job losses, credit tightening, economic fear. Even if prices drop, borrowing often becomes harder. Lenders pull back, requirements tighten. Liquidity dries up. The people who imagine buying easily during a crash often wouldn't qualify the way they think. The idea that crashes are clean buying opportunities typically is really a myth. They're really chaotic, and chaotic environment punish unprepared buyers. Another thing to understand is that markets don't announce crashes. They creep. By the time people feel confident a crash is happening, prices have often already moved. Waiting for confirmation usually means missing the window entirely. That's why professional investors don't wait for certainty. They look for mispricing. Mispricing exists when fear or confusion outweighs fundamentals. Right now, there is fear. There's a lot of confusion, but the fundamentals are not broken. That's why the crash narrative kind of keeps stalling. Another psychological factor at play is disappointment. People who missed low rates feel like they lost. Waiting for a crash feels like a way to get even. But markets don't care about fairness. They don't. They don't rewind to make outcomes equal. They move forward. Another important distinction is regional variation. Some markets will correct more often than others. Overbuilt areas, speculative markets, places with large job losses, those can see real declines. But a national housing crisis requires national forced selling. The condition does not exist right now. Localized corrections are not systemic collapses. Lumping them together creates bad expectations. Another thing crash watchers overlook is inflation. Inflation changes the meaning of price declines. A flat nominal price in an inflationary environment is effectively a real price decline. That adjustment happens quietly, not through dramatic headlines. People waiting for visible crashes miss visible corrections. Time plus inflation is one of the biggest affordability adjustments that doesn't feel like one. Another mistake people make is assuming renting is risk-free while waiting. Rents rise, lease terms change, mobility is limited. Waiting has a cost. Even if prices fall slightly, the cost of waiting can offset the benefit. That's why waiting must be intentional, not emotional. Here's the core truth. Housing crashes are rare. They require very specific conditions. Widespread leverage, weak underwriting, forced selling, no safety nets. Those conditions, they're not present today, at least not at scale. That doesn't mean prices only go up. It means expectations of a dramatic collapse are misplaced. The people who do best in housing don't wait for crashes. They wait for clarity. They ask, as I've said in many videos before, can I afford this payment comfortably? Is the loan structured flexibly? Do I have enough reserves? Does this fit my timeline? Those questions matter in every market. Buying well is about resilience, not timing. Resilient buyers can handle flat markets, slow markets, and even the most modest declines. Fragile buyers need perfect conditions that just rarely show up. The goal is not to predict a crash. The goal is to avoid fragility. When you avoid fragility, crashes lose their power over you. You stop waiting for that catastrophe to create an opportunity for you. You start creating opportunity through preparation. That's the shift most people need to make. Because housing success is not built on dramatic moments. It's built on boring, disciplined decisions made with clarity. And clarity beats crash predictions every time.